backstory we didn't quite explore.
That's for the
I think we're
sequel.
married to the
Well, I
universe.
figured there had to be a Mr. somewhere because we're all Mrs.
Married to the universe.
But yeah, that's what I was just going to say. We're married to the universal being.
Yeah.
All.
So 7 days from now, Walt Disney will be releasing a production of the novel by Madeleine L'Engle called A Wrinkle in Time. I'm sure many of you have seen the trailers for this. They actually did a movie version of this, Disney did, back in 2003. I think it was like direct to video kind of a thing. So this is definitely a much bigger budget production and stars Oprah and Zach Galifianakis and Reese Witherspoon and a bunch of other people. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about this film and the symbolism of this film, if for no other reason than to just provide yet one more example among countless others of how Hollywood, the mainstream media entertainment propaganda machine, is churning out the same occult, new age message every time we turn around. And so this whole idea that that in fact the Bible is, the message that they're trying to push or that they're trying to use, or somehow that the Bible is really this deception from the powers that be, or this Masonic lie, and the New Age message is what they're trying to keep from us, and what we're trying to unlock by decoding things is just nonsense. It really is. And Madeleine L'Engle and this Wrinkle in Time example is so perfect. I mean, it's something that kind of connects to me on a personal level. I was given, I had this book when I was a kid. Actually, all three, there was like a trilogy that she wrote, A Wrinkle in Time and A Wind in the Door and A Swiftly Tilting Planet. Okay, and the reason I was given this book is because even today, when you go on her Wikipedia page for Madeleine L'Engle, right there, it says that she was a Christian author alongside people like C.S. Lewis. And indeed, this is exactly how she was presented, and why I think people like my parents, oh, C.S. Lewis, great. Everyone loves C.S. Lewis. And and again, that's a whole nother, the question of C.S. Lewis and whether he was compromised in terms of certain themes getting into his writing. I mean, that's kind of a whole nother ball of wax we're going to have to get into another time. I'm still sort of researching that, and yeah, that's admittedly much more complicated than the question of Madeleine L'Engle. Okay, Madeleine L'Engle was without a doubt, through and through, not a Christian, although claiming to be a Christian, because all of her writings are pushing New Age concepts through and through. She's a Unitarian. She denied the deity of Christ, denied the fact that, the gospel is the only way to God. I mean, I actually found this excellent piece of writing that somebody put together just last year, May 2017, by Clarice Van Kueken. So this is very recently. This is 16 pages. It's a PDF. Link will be in the description. It's called The Gospel of Madeleine L'Engle, More Than Just a Wrinkle in Time. And she's basically, is it a she or a he? Clarice? I don't know. But basically going through and just methodically unpacking what Madeleine L'Engle's theology really was. And there is no way, shape, or form that you can deny that she was an absolute, not just a dabbler in mysticism and New Age ideas, but she was actually in very deep. She was the resident author, for however many years, of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, actually. And if any of you know about that specific church in New York, Cathedral of St. John the Divine, I'm sure many of you do, and all the crazy stuff that goes on there, and the carvings that are in some of the pillars. For instance, like the Twin Towers kind of falling, it shows all these apocalyptic scenes and crazy stuff. You also have this one. I just saw this one today about, it's got the Kabbalistic Tree of Life carved into a pillar of a supposedly Christian church. This is an Illuminati building, an Illuminati quote-unquote church, and most of you know that already. So, I mean, the fact that Disney's making this movie and Oprah is, the star, I showed that clip at the beginning where, yeah, very telling, right? Because once again, it's pantheistic monism, all right? because the guy doing the interview, he asked him, so your names are Mrs. Who, Mrs. Which, Mrs. What's it? So you're all Mrs. Who's the Mister? Who are you married to? And they all answer, well, we're married to the universe. We're married to the universal consciousness, the cosmic consciousness. It is absolutely New Age mysticism from top to bottom, back to front. And if you have any doubt about that, I mean, the whole thing, and this is what is so fascinating, of course, about Wrinkle in Time, is because not only is it just this blatantly New Age message, and they even talk about Jesus, and they quote scripture in the book. These entities that Oprah and Reese Witherspoon, these women, they are these celestial beings. They are essentially like ascended masters, right? They are these other beings that can change form, and they can go around the universe, sort of like angels or ascended beings, celestial beings, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they're spirit guides. It's exactly the function that they play in the movie, trying to help Meg develop her power, which is tessering. Tessering being this practice of creating a tesseract with her mind, and that's kind of one of the whole things that is so fascinating about this particular story and the way it's put together. I remember reading it as a child and thinking kind of like, what? Just thinking it was sort of weird, but so this is the second time Disney's making a movie out of this, and obviously very keen to push this, but. The main character, Meg, is this girl whose parents are physicists. They aren't spiritual people, per se. They are scientists. They're all about, they're sort of these like genius scientists. And her father's missing because he made some breakthrough in quantum physics, essentially. I don't know if they use the word quantum physics, but, it's not. It's definitely, advanced, theoretical, cutting edge physics. I mean, and so it's all about, he figured out how to create a fold in space-time, that's what a wrinkle in time, and create a tesseract, which is interesting too, because tesseract being this word that they use for basically a portal, a dimensional portal. So on one level, if you go to the IMDb, it talks about it's the story about these kids that travel to space and go to different planets and things. And that's true, but there's no rockets or there's no NASA or space agency involved. It's how do they travel through quote unquote space and go to different planets? Oh, they use interdimensional portals, right? They're with the aid of higher dimensional celestial beings. I mean, so here we go. So once again, we have the whole, you have the space narrative and science and quantum physics and, folding space-time and creating a wormhole, creating a portal, all of this sort of, that whole sci-fi vein being blatantly merged with the New Age spirituality vein. So it's like you've got the whole picture here. Essentially a fictionalized version of what I have been trying to say is the true quote-unquote secret space program. Here it is. It's right here, and they're just putting it all together. And the whole idea of that ultimately using psychic power, using magic, and and Wrinkle in Time is just the first book. As it goes on, it develops more and more into these practices that basically she comes up with different sort of her own fictional terms for all these ancient occult practices, like tessering is essentially in this PDF. They explain how basically these are just different terms that she coined to sort of repackage things like astral projection, telepathy, telekinesis, and so on. Like tessering and kything, and she kind of came up with all these clever names, but it's just there's nothing. But she didn't actually come up with any of the concepts. They're all just straight out of the occult. So once again, it brings us back to this tension here in the flat Earth quote-unquote community, right? Where on the one hand, you're exposing NASA and exposing the fake space narrative, right? Exposing the whole falseness of this Copernican cosmology, but then to turn around and embrace the same New Age pantheism, even after rejecting space, is something that still confounds me and amazes me, how people do not see how these things go hand in hand again and again and again. That's where they came from, going back all the way through the scientific revolution and all the figures that were used who were deep into the occult, the Kabbalah and the Hermeticism and the alchemy that inspired all these ideas in the first place, because in the end they're being used to point back to the same occultism and the same magic, but under this new guise of quote-unquote science. And this is exactly what we see in this movie. It's exactly what we see in this movie. I mean, to a T. And it's amazing. Along the same line, earlier this week I was looking at this video by my buddy Rex Joswick, right? He put together this compilation by this NASA scientist. And when you just listen to her making all these statements, the irony, it's amazing how she's on the one hand embracing materialistic evolution, but even while she talks about being social primates and how we're all just a product of materialistic evolution, she's still talking about sitting on the rocks and being one with her, connecting to her ancestors and how we all come from, you hear it bleeding through nonetheless.
I've been asked so many times recently about the flat earth, and sometimes you just gotta say, what the
My favorite story is where we all come from. It's an amazing thing to tell you that I know where you come from, and I know where I come from. And we come from the stars, literally. You may have heard we are stardust, and you thought it was something poetic, something that was kind of a nice analogy. But your body literally had to be forged inside a star that died. And this is not something that's conjectural. This is not a theory. And I don't know why we don't do more art and literature and dance and poetry about this story that we know is true. And the amazing thing is that if you ever wanted a connection to a larger universe, you already have it. You don't need to go looking for it. It's right here inside you. So let me challenge all of you out there. I let this story change me. How's it going to change you? You are a miracle of cosmic proportions, every single one of you out there. And it's not just other humans or other life. It's the very bones of the earth. Think about what the earth is made of: the silicon, the magnesium, the zinc, the iron, the copper, the silver. All of those were formed in the same explosions which created all of the atoms in your body right now. I often like to hike up into the mountains and sit on the rocks and feel the presence of my ancestors and my brothers and sisters. And sit on the rocks and feel the presence of my ancestors and my brothers and sisters.
If nature is made of nothing but unconscious matter, how come we're conscious? Scientism is where people turn science into a kind of religion. It becomes a kind of dogmatic belief system.
And this whole recurring theme from Sagan to Neil deGrasse Tyson and her about, we're all star stuff. We all came from the stars. A star had to die so that we could live. It's interesting. Speaking of which, in The Wrinkle of Time, going back to that, one of the Mrs. W's, one of these celestial beings, I was reading in the Wikipedia because I don't remember the story completely from memory, but she reveals at some point that she once was a star who sacrificed herself in the process of fighting this darkness, this blackness that's trying to take over the universe, right? And here once again, it's interesting because it's this embodiment of this, like, the demiurge concept, this evil mind, this evil tyrannical godlike being that's wants to control everything, and it's amazing, right? Because it's the same idea that we see in Dormammu of, like, the Doctor Strange movies. I did a video on that talking all about the demiurge concept and how it's this familiar theme in reality which demonizes the idea of the biblical God, which is what Gnosticism and occultism has always done. And taking Jehovah and painting him as the tyrant, painting him as the antagonist, right? And what's really interesting in A Wrinkle of Time is one of the planets that they like teleport to is this Kamzatz or whatever it's called. And it's this very dystopian sort of New World Order, 1984 like place where supposedly this evil darkness, this presence, this mind has fully taken control over. So it's like they use the plot device of traveling to different planets. They're able to kind of portray what it would look like if the whole planet was just under the control of this oppressive, controlling mind. Which, when you step back and really think about, what we hear all the time, right, where people are trying to conflate the God of the Bible with the powers of the New World Order all the time. I mean, how much did I talk about that with Jaron the other day? But you hear this like all across the board, and somehow they're mixing the two, and going like, man, if you're just a brainwashed religious slave, and you just give yourself over, and that's what religion is, and that's what the New World Order is trying to do, and we got to think for ourselves, and we got to, I mean, that's the whole theme of this story, is that, she overcomes the darkness by love and light, instead of just this dogmatic, oppressive conformity, right? And it's amazing. So so that's the message of this movie. It's the message of this author. This author, who here I'm quoting back from this PDF article about Madeleine L'Engle. Author Madeleine L'Engle shows precisely how she feels towards all Christians who hold firm to the truths of Scripture. In her nonfiction work, A Stone for a Pillow, Journeys with Jacob, she claims she accepts Jesus Christ as her Savior, yet she writes, if God created all of creation, if God is the author of Buddhists and Hindus and Jains as well as those who have, quote, accepted Jesus Christ as Lord, how can we avoid a wishy-washy permissiveness? Not by retreating back into a closed system, not by saying only those who believe exactly as I do can be saved, not by insisting that only those whose God fits into the same box as my God will go to heaven. Expounding on this idea a little further in the book, L'Engle states with confidence, the judgment of God is the judgment of love, not of power plays or vindication or hate. The second coming is the redemption of the entire cosmos, not just one small planet. She continues appealing to what human beings crave, all-encompassing love. All will be redeemed in God's fullness of time. All, not just the small population who have been given the grace to know and accept Christ. L'Engle devotes the next couple of pages to shaming those who believe Jesus will come again as judge, separating true believers and unbelievers for eternity, as it says in John 5:22-30, Matthew 25:31-46. But perhaps the most startling belief of universalism is found in another one of L'Engle's nonfiction works, The Irrational Season. In total contradiction to Scripture, she declares, no matter how many eons it takes, He, God, will not rest until all of creation, including Satan, is reconciled to Him, until there is no creature who cannot return His look of love with a joyful response of love. When asked if she's a universalist, L'Engle emphatically denies being one, and then proceeds to cleverly redefine a universalist as a particular incarnationalist. The two are one and the same. To understand how Madeleine L'Engle can claim to be a Christian and yet believe all will be redeemed, including Satan, it is imperative to realize she redefines Christian terminology and therefore Christianity itself. Like the mind science cults such as Christian Science, New Thought, a metaphysical group, the Unity School of Christianity, L'Engle redefines the word atonement, for example, to mean at one-ment, or to be at one with God, God being the infinite mind or thought. So there you go, back to the universal consciousness, the universal mind. In this view, to be at one with God is achieving a God-realized state that acknowledges one's inner divinity. It's the New Age gospel. Jesus comes to die for our sins in order to save us from the wrath of God and eternal damnation. The Christian's definition of atonement is what L'Engle calls a forensic view, emphasizing the word atonement is, quote, a bad word if taken forensically. So it just goes on and on. So yeah, this is a great article, but very interesting, because I was planning on doing a video on this topic at the beginning of the week, and then, I was actually going to do it on Tuesday, and then Jaron and I were finally available at the same time, so we did our 4-hour conversation, and then Bob jumps in, and then here we are kind of in the middle of this whole debate once again about the conference, and why are you attacking Robbie, and then, on that Greatest Showman video that, Bob was so offended by, Patricia just saw it for the first time, and she chimed in yesterday, and all the same things, like, how can you claim that God is the only way, and why are you being so close-minded, and why absolutely lockstep with everything that Madeleine L'Engle has against, the dogmatic Christianity, the dogmatism of the gospel, defending the New Age gospel, the open, we can all connect to God in our own way, insisting that atonement, the blood atonement, the cross is the only way to God is an offense and all this stuff. So yeah, crazy, right? And then to top it all off, right? This is the week where Billy Graham dies. That is, if he didn't, die years before, and then somehow this is all some big one other deception, but I'm not touching that. So, for the sake of argument, Billy Graham died this week, and Billy Graham, yet of course another controversial figure in terms of, was he really the greatest evangelist of the 20th century? Was he a sincere believer who wanted to preach the gospel, but then was eventually seduced into supporting ecumenical figures and ecumenical movements over the course of time? Or was he a Masonic plant from the very beginning and just a complete fraud and a complete liar and just a closet Satanist for his whole life, right? And that's not something, and again, sort of like C.S. Lewis, that's a far more complicated question than I think a figure like Madeleine L'Engle, because it's all out in the open with her. But indeed, so, okay, it is confusing to me. It really is, that for me to be engaging with Bob and Jaron and Patricia and talking about, no, this is that true biblical Christianity is uncompromising. It is exclusive. So the videos that I've been making are not attacking individuals for saying like, oh, you're such a bad guy, or attacking ODD, but focusing in on the teaching, focusing on in the ODD tree thing, the blatant occultism, the blatant twisting of the scriptures, just like L'Engle does. In Wrinkle of Time, there's a portion where these celestial beings are talking to these children and explaining how Jesus was just like Buddha and Gandhi and all these other lights throughout history, trying to fight the darkness, that he wasn't the Son of God, right? It's the same New Age crap, It's the same New Age. He was just an avatar. He was just one of the ascended masters. It's teaching this in this story. But to be just simply standing up and saying this is the same New Age attack that has been going on for decades, increasing with every decade. Madeleine L'Engle, being sold in Christian bookstores and being peddled off as this is just Christian fantasy because she quotes the Bible and talks about Jesus, but in reality it's absolutely the New Age gospel. Attacking the integrity of the scriptures, attacking the very core of the gospel and the atonement of the cross. Every single solitary point you would expect somebody, a New Ager to attack, she does. And this is what we're standing up against. And yet to act like I'm the crazy closed-minded Christian, and that's what's weird. And Bob's response too, like talking about Dean Odell, like you're being just like Dean Odell, but then somehow Robbie's. This is what I don't understand. Like just this week, Billy Graham dies, and Robbie mirrors this documentary, this video that somebody made back in 2014, which is all about, it's called Billy Graham: The New Age Crusade, where the G in Graham is the Masonic G, the Masonic square and compass, coexist. So the whole point of the whole vein of this documentary is saying that Billy Graham was a Masonic plant, basically, because of his ecumenical affiliations with Catholics and liberal theologians and such and such. When even if that were all true, at the same time, we can't deny that in countless circumstances, like millions of people did hear the gospel through the mouth of Billy Graham. I actually found this excellent little video clip here of Dave Hunt, where somebody had asked him about Billy Graham, and man, it was like one of the best responses I've ever heard. I'll leave the link again. And he says, Billy Graham's a puzzle to me, because on the one hand, he seems to preach the gospel very boldly. But then he has all these affiliations with Catholics, and he accepted this award that was in the name of this guy who's a straight up occultist, and all this stuff. And yeah, lots of questionable things about Billy Graham, no doubt about it. And he's like, I don't know what really happened, but in 1948, Billy Graham was saying things like the Catholic Church is one of the three greatest threats to the gospel. And yet 2 years later, in 1950, he somehow connected up with William Randolph Hearst of the Hearst newspaper dynasty, he's just straight up one of those Illuminati, barons, right? He's basically like one of the Rockefellers. You ever seen the Hearst Mansion? Speaking of Illuminati architecture. Anyways, Billy Graham got compromised one way or another, right? He did align himself with all kinds of ecumenical garbage. And that's why, regardless of whether it was just he erred, whether he strayed, or, whether that was the plan all along, I have a hard time. I've seen the little snapshot of, like, supposedly his name is listed in this Masonic book, in this ledger. I've looked into that to a degree, but, man, I could put together a compilation of like 10 hours of him just preaching the gospel and the cross and calling people to repentance. And, what do you do with that? Even with all of his ecumenical failings, millions of people got saved. You can't deny that. I've met, I don't know how many in my lifetime who gave their life to God at a Billy Graham crusade. And here was a dude who literally was filling stadiums, right? This is the irony to me. So this is supposedly the New Age crusade, Billy Graham. You're calling him he's a secret Satanist because of his ecumenical affiliations. And yet all this week I'm dealing with people who are so offended by the things that I'm saying about how the gospel cannot be compromised, how there's only one way to God, and that it's all or nothing. And yet these are people that are all signed up to be part of next year's Flat Earth Conference. And the whole question of, like, at some point, I really do think we'll try and fill stadiums. I really hope we'll get there, and I really hope that it's going to be this big, massive awakening and a revival. It's so interesting to hear what they were talking about in the 50s when Billy Graham started first doing his revivals, like in Los Angeles and all these things. And he had the greatest of intentions, for all we know. He thought, oh, William Randolph Hearst made an offer that was just gonna, the good was gonna outweigh the bad, right? What harm is that gonna do? So this is what I don't understand. How come Billy Graham, who's not been dead a week, is being called a Satanist, a Mason, a New Age shill, a secret New Age shill, even despite all the things that he did say that were true and were biblical, but he erred. And as Dave Hunt says, yeah, he compromised because he was not grounded in the Word, and he compromised because he eventually caved to things like evolution, and he caved to a lot of things over time, because he wasn't willing to stand up, because he wasn't willing to break off those associations with Catholics and liberals, and it just got worse and worse, right? Because he wanted both, right? He wanted to preach the gospel, the uncompromising gospel, but then partner with people who rejected the gospel. And that's ultimately what the whole thing is. And I'm not talking to somebody who's dead. I'm not talking about somebody who's dead or never going to bother actually watching or have a chance to respond. I'm talking to something how many people do you think in the course of those early years were saying, Billy, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think you should go hang out with the Pope. I don't think you should go to the White House. I don't think you should try and use the mainstream media. And yeah, that's hard, man. The whole thing about the circus, and it wasn't that I was saying that, oh, you guys are a bunch of freaks, it's a freak show. I'm saying you're just you're just laying down in front of the media that will turn you into a freak show. Like, that's all I'm saying. I'm not mocking you. I'm saying all you're doing is, but this is what doesn't make any sense. Like, why is it so offensive that I'm saying you're making a mockery out of yourselves, you're making a mockery out of Flat Earth, and more importantly than anything else, you're making a mockery out of the gospel. Because I don't know, I mean, more and more people contact me all the time. Multiple people who have been, the quote-unquote subject matter experts on with Mark Sargent. I've talked to several of them who are Christians, who kind of thought at the beginning that, yeah, I'm just going to go on. I know Mark's not a Christian, but I'm going to go on and share my professional background and share my faith and do that. And then as time has gone on, they are just incredibly disturbed by all the New Age and false spiritual teaching that is just rampant. It is rampant. But the one video where I dared to call it a circus, I got my brother Kevin Johnston, man. Kevin Johnston, who worked on Scientism Exposed, doing the audio. He knows pastors from all over the East Coast, apparently, from this particular Baptist conference. And he's told me multiple times, like, how there's actually tons of pastors out there, Christian pastors, who are on board with the flat earth, who believe, they're convinced, they're not attacking it, they're not mocking it, they believe it, but they don't want to say anything to their congregations. Why? Because if they do, because they don't want to unleash them into this like cesspool of New Age deception. People who are flat out denying the Bible, saying that it's just a book written by men. Oh yeah, the earth is flat, but if you talk about the blood of Christ and the cross, then they'll pounce all over you and they'll tell you how you're brainwashed and they'll tell you how, you know what I mean? They're not holding back. Santos Bonacci's not holding back. My goodness. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to touch the ecumenical compromise that has already taken shape. So how many Christians out there who are sort of caught in this weird place of going, yeah, I see the scriptural evidence, I see the fake NASA evidence, but when it comes to this movement, when it comes to this entity that is openly saying we want to be the new authority, not this false, flat Earth society shill authority. We want to be that which the mainstream media points to for answers, for interviews. We want to be that, and yet more than half of the people, as of right now, despise the gospel. But we have the audacity to go over and talk about Billy Graham's New Age, basically throw his whole life. And I'm not trying to defend Billy Graham. But I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead either. I'm not prepared to judge, to make that kind of statement. That's serious. I had a hard enough time, with Jeff Williams, and I still don't know what's up with that guy. But my goodness, the New Age gospel. So yeah, if that's what you really believe, if ecumenical compromise is that serious to you, then I don't understand. I don't understand why somehow like Dean Odell is the crazy fundamentalist, but none of the other Christian speakers are. Why? It was just because Dean Odell had the gumption to get up and tell them all to their face, the flat Earth won't save you. I mean, everyone's talking about, it's this wonderful time. There was all this connection and all this fellowship, and they're using the word like fellowship. Patricia's telling me about how it was this wonderful time. But I know they're not talking about, when Dean Odell was talking and when Marmar Queen got up and, was yelling from the audience for 10 minutes. I mean, if the whole conference was like that, they wouldn't be talking about connection and fellowship. And yet that was the only time where somebody came up and said, nope, not just a creator, the God of the Bible. Not the video game simulation theory type of God, not the ancient alien God, not the God within you God, the real God. And I know probably more than half of the people there believe in the real God. So how does that make sense when they're coming, they do want fellowship. Most of the people going are going for the right reasons, so that's the hard thing. I'm not attacking those people. You want to talk about the circus? I mean, turned into a free. Speaking this week, PewDiePie. You guys know who PewDiePie is. I'm sure most of you have seen it. In a day, he's got millions of views. And all it is just the most crass, juvenile, idiotic crap, making fun of the flat Earth, making fun of my friend Kathy, who's at the conference, and mocking her and mocking David Weiss and all these people. because of footage that they have from the conference, because that we've just handed to them. And what does that accomplish? Oh, well, there's no such thing, you're spreading flat earth, you're saying flat earth. Isn't that funny how, like, you can go and, like, literally just, like, mock somebody straight up in front of his millions of viewers, and nobody's offended by that. But they're offended by my little video about, that is pointing out that that was basically saying that's exactly what they're going to do. How does that make sense? How does any of this make sense? I'm at a loss in a way, trying to understand why that doesn't bother you, but my little video does. Because all I'm trying to do is say, yeah, like, you can't skirt around the Bible question. You can try and make it about denodal. You can try and make it about, like, oh, this is some personal thing. It's not, right? Any more that like Robbie has some personal agenda against Billy Graham. No. Like, okay, if you really think Billy Graham's a Masonic shill, you're serious. Okay, dude. Let's look at the evidence. If that's true, that's a big problem. The New Age gospel it really is a serious threat. That's kind of all my whole point. The New Age deception, the one world religion, the mystery Babylon, Disney, NASA, Freemason, Kabbalist religion. It's all one and the same thing. That's the whole point. So if that's what we do agree on, then why are we having this? If we're on the same page, then why is it Billy Graham got in bed with William Randolph Hearst? We know whether he was a Mason or not. We do know that. He did get chummy with the world. He did get too comfortable being revered by the media and by people in power and by people who rejected the gospel. That's undeniable. Was he trying to, and the whole question of preaching the gospel that is an offense and a stench and the aroma of death to the world, or legitimizing or trying to legitimize the gospel. That's the corner you don't want to turn, and that's where all this started. And I asked you, Robbie, like, what do you mean legitimize flat Earth? Like, we could legitimize biblical cosmology, or legitimize biblical creation, or legitimize that word. Was when I started to speak. That's when I got blocked. And he just started deflecting on me. So this is not a personal attack. Just saying, like, how I'm saying. I think most people know what I'm saying. Not trying to make this some stupid. That's the thing. Like, how much stuff has gone on, and all the craziest stuff that Matt Boylan has said about people, and people that have, I've never called Patricia Steere a man, or never called anyone or Mark Sargent a CIA, whatever. I never called Robbie a secret Freemason. You're a dude who is now in the company of people who are talking about winning, quote unquote, about a great awakening, about defeating the New World Order. This is what they all talk about, and if you get sucked into that thinking because it's conducive towards, the moment, because it helps bring awareness. It's all in the name of awareness and flat Earth awakening, and you're just gonna you're not gonna draw a line. Not even just the New Agers, but the people that are claiming to be Christian flat earthers, but teaching Gnostic doctrines, pointing people to Gnostic texts, teaching that kind of heresy. I mean, these are serious things. So, Wrinkle in Time. It's crazy stuff. Oprah Winfrey. Anyhow, that's my rant, for better or for worse. I love you guys. God bless.